Hello and welcome to this episode of the Academic Papers Podcast, where we celebrate academia and bring education to everyone. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the world of neuropathic pain with a paper by Peter A. Smith titled The Known Biology of Neuropathic Pain and Its Relevance to Pain Management. You know, most people, when they think about pain, they think about it as like a simple signal, like a warning light, like something's wrong. But neuropathic pain is different. It's not just a symptom. It's really a disease in itself.
Right.
It's caused by damage or dysfunction in the nervous system.
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of like the wiring gets crossed, and the pain signals keep firing even when there's no real threat.
Right.
And this can happen after a nerve injury, or with conditions like diabetes or multiple sclerosis, even shingles.
Yeah, and it's not just a little bit of discomfort. We're talking about chronic pain, often debilitating pain. That can impact people's lives, making it difficult to sleep, work, or even just enjoy simple pleasures.
Absolutely. And this paper really emphasizes the biological complexity of neuropathic pain. Right? It's not just about inflammation, although that plays a role. It's really about a whole cascade of events that unfold at the cellular and molecular level that lead to these persistent pain signals.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit. What actually happens when a nerve gets injured?
Well, so imagine a nerve as this delicate cable, transmitting signals throughout your body, and then when that cable gets damaged, it triggers a chain reaction. First, there's this process called Wallerian degeneration, where the injured nerve fibers start to break down.
It's like the cable starts to fray and unravel.
Exactly. And this breakdown attracts immune cells to the site, like a cleanup crew rushing in to clear the debris. But this immune response isn't always helpful.
Right.
In fact, it can actually contribute to the problem.
How so?
Well, so these immune cells, they release all sorts of signaling molecules called cytokines and chemokines, which are basically chemical messengers that tell other cells what to do. But in the context of neuropathic pain, these messengers can actually make the nerves more sensitive and excitable.
So it's like they're amplifying the pain signals.
Precisely. And these signaling molecules can also trigger changes in the glial cells, which are the support cells in the nervous system. They become activated and start releasing even more inflammatory substances, creating this sort of vicious cycle of inflammation and pain.
Oh, wow. So it's like the cleanup crew accidentally sets the whole building on fire.
That's a great analogy. And this ongoing inflammation can actually change the structure of the nerves themselves. They can become hypersensitive, firing off pain signals even at the slightest touch, or even spontaneously with no external trigger at all.
Wow. So it's not just the initial injury causing the pain, but this whole cascade of events that unfold afterward, leading to long-lasting changes in the nervous system.
Exactly. And that's why neuropathic pain is so difficult to treat. It's not just about masking the symptoms. It's about addressing those underlying biological processes that are driving the pain.
And those processes are incredibly complex, right? It's not just one thing going wrong. It's a whole orchestra of dysfunction.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to understand the specific mechanisms involved in each individual's pain experience so that we can develop more targeted and effective treatments.
Now, the paper also mentioned something called neurogenic neuroinflammation. What exactly is that?
Yeah, so it's this fascinating concept that basically means that the nervous system itself can trigger and maintain inflammation.
Okay.
Traditionally, we've thought of inflammation as a response to an injury or infection, but now we're realizing that the nerves themselves can play an active role in driving inflammation, especially in chronic pain conditions.
It's not just that the nerves are damaged, they're actually contributing to the problem.
Exactly. And this neurogenic inflammation can lead to further sensitization of the nerves and make the pain even worse. It's like a vicious cycle.
Yeah. And this is where the paper really highlights the need for more research to understand these complex interactions between the nervous system and the immune system. Because if we can figure out how to break this cycle, we might be able to develop new therapies that target the root causes of neuropathic pain.
I agree. This paper really makes a compelling case for a more holistic approach to treating neuropathic pain, one that takes into account this intricate interplay between neurons, glial cells, immune cells, and all the signaling molecules involved.
So we're not just talking about painkillers anymore. We're talking about therapies that can actually modify the course of the disease. And potentially even reverse some of the damage.
Precisely. It's a really exciting area of research with a lot of potential to improve the lives of millions of people who suffer from neuropathic pain.
Now, we've been talking about nerve injuries in general, but the paper also points out there's a lot of variation in how people experience and respond to neuropathic pain.
That's right. It's not a one-size-fits-all condition.
Right.
The type of nerve injury, the location of the injury, the individual's genetics, their age, their previous pain experiences. All of these factors can influence how neuropathic pain manifests and how it responds to treatment.
So it's like each person's pain is a unique fingerprint.
That's a great way to put it. And this variability is one of the biggest challenges in developing effective treatments for neuropathic pain.
Yeah, it makes it harder to find a magic bullet that works for everyone.
Exactly. And that's why the paper emphasizes the importance of personalized medicine, tailoring treatments to the individual's specific needs and characteristics.
So how do we go about doing that? How do we move from this general understanding of neuropathic pain to a more personalized approach to diagnosis and treatment?
Well, one key tool that's mentioned in the paper is quantitative sensory testing, or QST.
Okay.
It's a set of standardized tests that measure a person's sensitivity to different stimuli, like touch, pressure, heat, cold, and vibration.
So it's like mapping a person's individual pain profile.
Exactly. And by analyzing these profiles, clinicians can start to identify patterns and categorize patients based on their unique sensory experiences.
Okay. And this information can then guide treatment decisions.
Precisely. For example, if someone is particularly sensitive to cold, a treatment that targets cold allodynia might be a good option.
So cold allodynia is pain triggered by a normally non-painful cold stimulus.
Exactly.
This is really fascinating. It seems like we're moving towards a more precise understanding of pain, not just treating it as this vague, amorphous thing.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this paper so exciting. It's not just summarizing what we know about neuropathic pain. It's pointing the way towards a future where pain management is more personalized, targeted, and effective.
This has been a really insightful discussion so far, and we've only just scratched the surface of this complex topic, but I think we need to pause here for a moment to let all this information sink in. We'll be back soon to continue our deep dive into neuropathic pain. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about how personalized medicine holds the key to more effective pain management for those with neuropathic pain.
Yeah, it's like we're moving from a one-size-fits-all approach to tailoring treatments to the individual, which is incredibly exciting.
It is. The challenge, of course, lies in figuring out what makes each person's pain unique and how we can use that information to guide treatment.
So where do we even start with that?
Well, one approach that is mentioned in the paper is to look at the specific type of nerve injury and the resulting patterns of pain. For instance, they discuss two common animal models of neuropathic pain: spared nerve injury, or SNI, and chronic constriction injury, or CCI.
And those models help researchers understand different ways nerves can be damaged and how those differences translate to pain.
Exactly. So both models involve nerve damage, but the type and extent of the injury differ, leading to distinct pain profiles.
Can you give an example?
Sure. So in SNI, only a portion of the nerve fibers are injured, while in CCI, the entire nerve is constricted. Think of it like a cable, where some wires are cut in SNI, while the entire cable is squeezed in CCI.
That's interesting. So how do those differences play out in terms of pain?
Well, studies have shown that SNI in rodents tends to produce long-lasting mechanical allodynia, that heightened sensitivity to touch we talked about earlier, whereas in CCI, the allodynia is often shorter-lived.
So even though both models involve nerve injury, the pain experience and its duration can vary significantly, depending on the specific type of damage.
Exactly. And this highlights the importance of understanding the nuances of nerve injury in each individual. If we can pinpoint the specific type of damage, we might be able to predict how the pain will evolve and choose the most effective treatment strategy.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, you mentioned that individual factors also play a role in neuropathic pain. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Absolutely. So the paper highlights how factors like sex, age, genetics, and even previous injuries can influence how a person experiences and responds to neuropathic pain.
It seems like pain is much more complex than just a simple signal from a damaged nerve.
It definitely is. There's this whole interplay of biological, psychological, and social factors that contribute to the overall pain experience.
So it's not just about fixing the damaged nerve, it's about addressing the whole person and all the factors that might be contributing to their pain.
Exactly. And that's where personalized medicine comes in. It's about tailoring treatments to the individual, taking into account all of these factors to find the best possible approach for each person.
Now, the paper also mentions the concept of pain phenotypes. What are those exactly?
Pain phenotypes are basically clusters of specific signs and symptoms that characterize different types of neuropathic pain. So instead of lumping everyone with neuropathic pain into one big category, we can start to identify subgroups based on their unique pain experiences.
So instead of saying someone has neuropathic pain, we might say they have a specific pain phenotype, characterized by, let's say, burning pain, shooting pain, or sensitivity to cold.
Exactly. And the idea is that by understanding these phenotypes, we can develop more targeted treatments that address the specific mechanisms driving each type of pain.
It seems like this approach could really revolutionize pain management, moving us away from trial and error and towards more precise and effective therapies.
I agree. It's a really exciting area of research, and tools like quantitative sensory testing, or QST, are helping us to identify these phenotypes and tailor treatments accordingly.
Right, we talked about QST earlier, but can you just remind us how it works?
Sure. So QST involves a series of tests that measure a person's sensitivity to different stimuli, like touch, pressure, heat, cold, and vibration. And by analyzing the responses, clinicians can create a detailed sensory profile for each patient, revealing any areas of heightened sensitivity or altered sensation.
So it's like a diagnostic roadmap for neuropathic pain, guiding clinicians towards the most effective treatment options.
That's a great analogy. And by combining QST data with other clinical information, like the type of nerve injury, the patient's medical history, and their individual needs and preferences, we can start to paint a more complete picture of their pain experience.
This approach seems much more patient-centered, empowering individuals to actively participate in their own pain management.
Exactly. And ultimately, the goal is to move beyond simply managing pain and towards improving overall quality of life for those living with neuropathic pain.
Now, while personalized medicine holds a lot of promise, the paper also acknowledges that translating research findings into clinical practice is not always straightforward.
That's right. Animal models, while valuable, don't always perfectly mimic human neuropathic pain.
Right.
And even within the human population, there's a wide range of individual responses to injury and treatment.
So bridging the gap between research and reality is a key challenge.
It is, but the paper suggests several ways forward, including refining animal models to better reflect the diversity of human experiences, using human tissues and cells to study pain mechanisms in a more relevant context, and incorporating psychological and social factors into research and treatment plans.
It seems like a multi-pronged approach is needed to truly understand. And if this has been such a fascinating discussion about the complexities of neuropathic pain and the emerging approaches to diagnosis and treatment.
I agree. It's a rapidly evolving field, and while there are challenges, there's also a lot of hope for the future.
Welcome back to our deep dive into neuropathic pain. We've covered a lot of ground, from the basic mechanisms of neuropathic pain to the importance of personalized medicine. Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about potential therapies and what the future holds for this often debilitating condition.
Yeah, sounds good.
The paper spends quite a bit of time discussing the challenges of treating neuropathic pain, highlighting the limited success of many current therapies. Why is it so difficult to find effective treatments for neuropathic pain?
Well, I think, as we've discussed, neuropathic pain is a complex beast. It's not just about blocking pain signals. It's really about addressing the underlying dysfunction in the nervous system.
Right.
Many current therapies, like painkillers and anticonvulsants, they primarily target the symptoms of pain without really addressing the root cause.
So it's like putting a bandage on a broken bone.
Exactly. It might provide some temporary relief, but it doesn't fix the underlying problem.
Right. The paper also mentions that targeting inflammation hasn't been as successful as hoped. Why is that?
Well, inflammation is definitely a key player in neuropathic pain, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. Simply blocking inflammatory molecules hasn't proven to be very effective, likely because the process is so complex and involves so many different pathways.
I see. So we need a more nuanced approach, one that targets multiple aspects of neuropathic pain, not just inflammation.
Precisely. And that's where some of the newer research is heading, exploring therapies that target specific ion channels or neurotransmitters, or growth factors involved in pain signaling.
Can you give some examples of those newer therapies?
Sure. One promising area is the development of monoclonal antibodies that target specific nerve growth factors. So these factors are involved in the sensitization and survival of pain-sensing neurons, so blocking them could potentially reduce pain signals.
Interesting. So it's like cutting off the fuel supply to the pain pathway.
Exactly. Another area of research is focused on gene therapy, where scientists are exploring ways to deliver genes that can block pain signals. or promote nerve regeneration.
Gene therapy, that sounds pretty futuristic.
Okay.
Is that something that's likely to become a reality for neuropathic pain treatment?
It's still early days, but there have been some encouraging results in preclinical studies, so it's definitely an area to watch.
Now, the paper also touches upon the importance of harnessing the body's natural healing mechanisms to combat neuropathic pain.
Yes. There's growing interest in understanding how the body naturally resolves inflammation and promotes tissue repair.
Right.
So if we can figure out how to enhance these processes, we might be able to develop therapies that help the body heal itself rather than just masking the symptoms.
And the paper mentions something called off signals. Can you explain what those are?
Yeah, so off signals are basically mechanisms that actively suppress inflammation. Think of it like a braking system that prevents inflammation from spiraling out of control.
Okay.
These off signals involve a variety of molecules, including specialized pro-resolving mediators, or SPMs, which are derived from lipids.
SPMs, those sound interesting.
They are. These SPMs are like specialized cleanup crews that come in after the initial inflammatory response to clear out debris and promote tissue healing.
So the idea is that if we can boost the activity of these SPMs, we might be able to enhance the body's natural ability to resolve inflammation and reduce neuropathic pain.
Exactly. It's like giving the body's own healing mechanisms a helping hand.
That's fascinating. This approach seems much more aligned with the concept of personalized medicine, tailoring treatments to the individual's specific needs and biology.
I agree. It's about working with the body, not against it.
As we wrap up our deep dive, I'd like to touch on one final point that the paper raises: the importance of considering the psychological and social aspects of neuropathic pain.
Absolutely. Chronic pain can take a huge toll on a person's mental and emotional well-being. It can lead to anxiety, depression, sleep disturbances, social isolation, creating this vicious cycle where these psychological factors can actually worsen the pain.
So it's not just about treating the physical symptoms, it's about addressing the whole person.
Exactly. And that's why a multidisciplinary approach is often needed, involving not just pain specialists, but also psychologists, physical therapists, and social workers.
It's about creating a support system that helps people navigate the physical, emotional, and social challenges of living with neuropathic pain.
Precisely. And ultimately, the goal is to improve overall quality of life for those affected by this complex and often challenging condition.
Well, this has been an incredibly informative and thought-provoking deep dive into the world of neuropathic pain. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us today.
My pleasure.
For our listeners who are eager to learn more about this paper, you can visit academicjobs.com and search for Peter A. Smith to explore his work in greater detail. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.